Welcome to Science Exam Etiquette, the top tips for success. So when you're given the paper, the first thing you want to do when you're reading the question is you want to write neatly and clearly. The examiner might not be able to read small or messy writing. So in school, when we have the MAG 10, this is the reason that we push you to be able to have clear and neat handwriting, so that when you answer exam questions, the examiner can read your writing and give you the marks that you deserve. If you do forget words, you can describe what they're referring to. For example, heart, write the organ that pumps the blood. When answering questions, it is essential that you never use generic words such as it or they. State clearly what you mean or you might lose marks. And at the end of the paper, always go over your answers. Check back through your work. You might think of something else for an extra mark. So to summarize, write neatly and clearly. Be specific in what you are doing. Never use words such as it or they. Always state exactly what you mean. The next thing to consider when answering questions is when you waste time and space rewriting the question. For science, there is no need to do this. The question is always going to be accessible to the examiner. Therefore, all you need to do is to actually answer the question itself. You do not need to repeat it. So, for example, in the question given below, Darwin was the first scientist to state that humans and other primates had common ancestors. There is no need to start your question with many people were against Darwin's ideas. All you need to simply state is the reason they were against his ideas as the question states. So in summary, please ensure that when you're answering a question, you do not repeat the question. You simply answer what you are given. There is a significant number of words used in science. We call this exam rubric. We are going to go through some following slides which will go over exactly what these words mean for science answers. So for example, evaluate, compare, describe, explain. All of these we will go through to ensure that you understand what they mean and how to answer the question and how to gain maximum marks for this type of question. This is quite a common question where you are given a list on the left-hand side and a list on the right-hand side, and you have to connect them up. In the question itself, a key point would be to highlight the keywords or information that you are trying to get. The next thing to look at is how many marks is this question worth and what do you have to do to get them. Draw one line from each plant in list A for the adaptation that helps the plant to survive in list B. Please notice that list B actually has a choice of 4. This means that one of them is going to be left out. It is a 3-mark question. Therefore, you have to draw 3 lines matching the correct plant to show how the adaptation helps the plant to survive. 1 will be left out. It is essential that you do not think to draw more than 1 line. Read very carefully the question. How many lines will often be done in bold? Now, this is another type of question. This is a 3-mark question, and all it is asking for is 3 correct one-word answers. But how do we know this? If you look at the question, all organisms compete for resources to survive. Give 3 factors plants compete for. We know this because there is only a small amount of space to write. If there was more lines, then the examiner is looking for a more in-depth answer. Again, a top tip. Look at the size of space that has been provided for the answer. Look at the number of marks. 3 factors in such a small space can only mean they want one-word answers. So let's look at this type of question. This is a 1-mark question and it's asking you to draw a ring around the correct answer. You can see that I have underlined where it says draw a ring. You are given the question and you are given a choice of 3 within the box. You have a 1 in 3 chance of getting this right. Always give it a go. Even if you do not know the answer, it is like a multiple choice question. Draw a ring around one that you think is the most appropriate and you never know, you may actually get this right. Leaving it blank is a surefire way to score 0 marks. Having a go, you may get it right. Now we move on from the simple 1 to 3 mark questions into the extended answer questions. For science, these would be 6 marks. If the 6 mark question wanted a balanced argument, for example, let's have a look at how the marks would be allocated. For 1 to 2 marks, you would either give a point for or against whichever argument you're trying to balance. For 3 to 4 marks, you would be giving 1 point for and 1 point against with a simple explanation. This could also include a simple conclusion or opinion. Moving to 5 to 6 marks, you would have given at least 2 points, both for and against your argument. Both would have a good logical explanation attached. You will also have included a conclusion or an opinion at the end. So an extended 6 mark question could be a variety of things. For example, creating the balanced argument or an evaluation. Remember, an evaluation is like a balanced argument. You are creating a for and against, the good and the bad points, and ending with a conclusion and/or an opinion. Now, let's look at a particular question. As we can see, this question, you are given a lot of information. It's essential that you actually read through this information, highlight or underline points that you think are relevant. I would suggest you read through it once, look at the question, and then reread and highlight those key points. So the newspaper headline reported the research and wrote, "Research shows that diabetics should eat dark chocolate. Was the newspaper statement justified? Include in your answer evidence that supports the newspaper statement and evidence that does not support the newspaper statement. Remember to give a conclusion to your answer." So as we discussed on the previous slide, we are trying to create a balanced argument. To gain the 5 to 6 marks, we must give 2 points for and 2 points against. And remember to give a conclusion or an opinion at the end. So in summary, it is always important to state your point and explain in detail. If you can use evidence or examples to back up your point. You are asked clearly from the information given. You may also need to add in your own information on what you know about diabetes. Always remember, for a 6 mark question where you are justifying or creating a balanced argument or evaluations, you must always try to give 2 arguments for, 2 arguments against, with explanations. Let's continue looking at exam rubric. This time I've chosen a chemistry question. The question asks you to describe this theory of mountain formation. The first thing that you must ensure is that you have read the question and you have looked at the diagram. Most of the answers for a describe could be found within the diagram or the information provided. If you look at the lines provided for this question, there are 2 of them. This means the examiner is looking for a sentence and not a one-word answer. It is always worthwhile having a go. Even if you do not know the answer, writing an educated guess can score you the mark. So a describe question is simply looking at the diagram or the information. How does the Earth change over the billions of years? Can we use the diagram to help describe this particular change? This particular slide, I'm going to show how we would break down this question in order to answer it. It is a 6 mark extended question. The first thing we need to look at is that arteries and veins have different structures and different functions. Explain how the different structure of arteries and veins relate to their different functions. The first word that I am going to pick out is the word explain. You must say because. For an explain question, it is asking for a description, followed by because, and then the explanation why. Let's now pick out what this question is actually wanting us to do. So you have arteries and veins. These are the two structures they wish us to compare. There are some other words in here we pick out just in case we don't know. The word structures, how it is made. The word functions is the job of that particular structure. Now, if I was to look at these two things, here are examples of the answers shown below. So if I was to take veins, veins carry blood into the heart. Now I'm going to look at how the structure is related to their function. Thinner walls, that is my description, followed by because, and now I'm going to give my explanation why. Because the blood is pumped at a lower pressure. Carries blood into the heart, contains valves because it must prevent the backflow of blood. An explain question must always have the word because in it. You are explaining how the description is linked to the explanation. Now we're going to look at a compare question. This is a crossover question between the chemistry paper and the physics paper. You are given two pictures. One is showing the plum pudding model, one is showing the nuclear model. You're asked to compare the position of subatomic particles in the plum pudding model with the nuclear model. How would I approach this particular question? The exam rubric word here is compare. This means that you must describe similarities and differences. So when I look at the two diagrams, in order to obtain 6 marks in this question, I would do at least 2 similarities and at least 2 differences. So for example, let's look at this first word. The plum pudding model has no nucleus, but the nuclear model does. I have chosen one aspect in both diagrams and I have compared them using the connective word of but. Another connective word could be however. The plum pudding model has a single ball of positive charge. However, the nuclear model has a positive charges in its nucleus. Another connective word could be whereas. Plum pudding model has electrons in random positions, whereas the nuclear model has electron in fixed positions orbiting the nucleus in energy levels. And lastly, another word that can be used is unlike. Plum pudding model has no neutrons, unlike the nuclear model that has neutrons in the nucleus. When I am describing similarities and differences, I am not listing them. I am not listing what the plum pudding model has and has not. I am not listing what the nuclear model has and has not. I am taking something that I can see in both and I am comparing them using connectives such as but, however, whereas, or unlike. It is very important that we do this in full sentences, that we simply do not list. It is a describe the similarities and differences between both of them in a comparative statement. Lastly, when you are finished after the exam, you always check your work. It is important to go through your work to check that you have not missed any questions. Perhaps you turned 2 pages when you meant to turn 1. It is also important to turn your paper over and check that there is no questions on the very back cover. You will come to the point in the exam where it says end of questions. That means you know that you have finished all questions. It is important to use correct spelling and punctuation. Although there is no allocated marks in science, it does show that you are capable of creating clearly logical sentences. Check that you have written makes sense, especially in the extended 6-mark questions. Reread your work. If you have repeated yourself, cross out the repetition. You only need to state it once. There are no marks for repeating the same information in your questions. So let's recall the exam rubric now. State means a short answer. Don't waste time describing or explaining. Often these are one-word answers. Describe, recall facts. What does it look like? What happens? A step-by-step information. How does it change from the beginning to the end? Perhaps in a describe question, it will also ask you to use the information in a table. If it says that, use the information in the table to describe how things change. An explain question. An explain question must have a clear scientific reason. You're going to use because to link your things together. Describe, because, explanation, why. Evaluate. An evaluate question is where you're going to use your knowledge and any information given to provide pros and cons and to make a conclusion, a scientific justification. Again, they may ask you to evaluate, to justify, or to create a balanced argument. All of this is asking for the same format. Suggest. Apply your knowledge to a new situation. Give a scientific reason. In science, you will often be presented with a novel situation. You will have been taught the theory in school. It is applying what you know to a new situation. Calculate. Use the numbers given to work out the answer. Show you're working. You might get marks for it. It is very important. It's not the fact that you might get marks for it. The examiner can track what you are doing. If you make a mistake at one part of the question, you can always have an error carried forward and achieve the marks for later on. Always check that you are using the correct units. Meters, centimeters. Compare similarities and differences. Use words such as more, less, increase, decrease, whereas, however. Think about the question we spent some time going over. It is important that you never list, that you actually compare similarities and differences as seen between diagrams or parts of information. Complete. Simply asks you to write your answer in the space given. Use the information. Again, I am repeating this. This is very important. You won't get any marks if you don't use the information given. Use numbers from a table or a graph and then explain it scientifically if it is an explain question. Allocate your marks. Use the number of marks as a guide for how much you need to write. For 1 mark questions, short, precise answers, perhaps even a one-word answer. 2 marks can mean to expand on your answer, give a scientific reason or an explanation because this happened. Perhaps you need to quote information. Perhaps by quoting information, this could be a 3-mark question. 4 marks. When you get to the 4 and the 5 marks plus, in science, there are no marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. You can bullet point your answer. Keep it clear and concise. No waffling. Do not repeat yourself. For extended answer questions, read the question. Take a moment to structure your answer. Look at both sides of the debate and make sure you justify your conclusion if you are asked to give one. Now let's look at the most common mistakes. Not reading the question properly. If it is a describe versus an explain question will want an explanation why. Use the word because this happens. Timing of the paper. You are given 70 minutes to complete the paper. You must finish the paper in that time allocated. Ignoring the marking scheme. Allocate marks. If it's 2-mark question, it's going to want 2 points and so on. Repetition. Making the point more than once won't get you any extra marks. Make the point once. Don't waste your time repeating it. Missing part of the question. Describe and explain. The and explain part wants you to put the word because in and give a scientific explanation why you have got the particular description, such as a changing in carbon dioxide levels. Why did that happen? Put the word because in. And lastly, 1 mark can make all the difference and improve your grades. Your exam certificates stay with you forever. Employers will ask to see your certificates. Make sure you get the results you are proud of to put on your CV. On the day, think positive and stay calm. 1 mark can make all the difference. Answer every question that you can. Good luck with your exams, Year 11.